The Laurier boom. During Laurier's time in office, Canada's economy began to see a great prosperity. World prices and markets began to expand for Canadian products. A lot of this had to do with being a part of the British Commonwealth. A rise in industrial production created a demand for raw materials. This allowed Canada to increase prices based on demand, creating more profit. The more demand there is, the prices go up. The better shipping technology combined with lower freight rate helped the export of Canadian goods. Also, it doesn't hurt that Britain during this time period had tariffs and taxes on goods coming from Europe and things like that made the Canadian products a lot cheaper. New technologies in production allowed for Canada to make the most of its natural resources. Pulp and paper mining of the shield for rich ore deposits. The CPR allowed for expansion west and helped the industrial boom reach BC. Dramatic growth in lumbering and mining. Within 10 years, the forest industry grew from $2 million to $65 million. You have to realize that is the turn of the century, so that's billions of dollars in today's costs. Harvest rights and accessibility led to cutting frenzies. So basically, there was no such thing as sustainable forest renewals, things like that. They just cut whatever they could. Rising world prices helped the agricultural industry to thrive on the prairies. The more demand there were, the more prices, and the more people that there were farming, the higher the cost. The Canadian prairies became known as the breadbasket of the world. New hydroelectric potential was beginning to be harnessed for use in the new factories and mines. Last Best West. Last Best West was a slogan used to attract people to the Canadian West to settle down as homesteaders and settlers. More money, more people, more money. Basically, they realized if we had more people there farming, we could grow more food and bring in more money to the country. So there's a huge push to try and get people to come to the prairies. With the end of the Depression of the late 1800s, there was demand for wheat around the world. There were no more homestead lands available in the U.S. They were all settled, so people had to try and find somewhere else to go, and the Canadian prairies was the number one spot. Canada West started to look extremely appealing for people wanting to settle. Nearly all immigrants between the 1867 and 1890s North America was to the U.S. Nobody wanted to come to the barren, unpopulated land of Canada. Those who did come to Canada usually left for the U.S. because of the lack of work and harsh climate. Between 1896 and 1911, the Canadian government encouraged people to come and settle the West. During these years, the prairie population increased dramatically, and Clifford Sifton became the new Minister of the Interior in charge of immigration. Sifton was a Westerner and was dedicated to populating the prairies. He did everything he could to try and get people there. He launched a recruitment program to try and lure people to come and settle on the prairies. It targeted the European and U.S. people who would make good farmers. They promoted Canada all throughout Europe. They promoted Canada to the U.S. because people in the U.S. wanted to come and farm, but there was no more land available, so there was a perfect opportunity to get people to come to Canada. Sifton brought controversy when he encouraged immigrants from the great grasslands of Eastern and Central Europe. This is the area in Eastern Europe, such as Ukraine, things like that, who had grown up on farming, knew how to farm, but were unable to farm in these areas. So he encouraged these people to come into Canada. Many Canadians were uncomfortable with the newcomers who would be bringing a different language and culture into theirs. Basically, the English people did not like all these other immigrants coming because they felt that with all these other languages and cultures that the English population would not be able to sustain itself. Sifton had created an open door policy and defended it. Sifton stated that a stalwart peasant in a sheepskin coat, born in the soil, whose forefathers had been farmers for 10 generations, is good quality. He basically felt anybody that was a farmer would be a good fit in Canada. You have to realize this was still focused on Europe, and many people from Asia were still had the doors closed to them. Settlers who come to the prairies were a much more diverse group as a result of Sifton's open door policy. Ukrainians, Russians, Czechs, Hungarians, Poles, Romanians, Austrians, etc. The British settlers still made up one-third of all the immigrants, and many actually failed as farmers because having no background in it. Many of these people from the United Kingdom came to Canada with no farming background on the allure of getting land and becoming farmers, but they had no clue what they were doing. Many of the American settlers who came north the border assimilated in Canadian culture easily. That's because Canadian culture was very similar to the U.S., and they're able to come here and fit in quite well. The average American brought $1,000 in farming equipment when he came to Canada. The average European brought $15. So this was a huge factor when it came to farming. Many of the European people that came to settle were escaping poverty and wanted to come to Canada to try and start a new life. And it was very hard for them as they did not have the resources to um, be successful. Many of these people came to the new province of Alberta as the place to settle between 1896 and 1914, so about not quite 20 years, a million American settlers alone came to Canada. At the same time, thousands of British children were being sent to Canada. Many came from orphanages or were unwanted children of poor parents. Others were just sent away by the authorities without choice of their parents. So basically, Britain was realizing they had a huge issue when it came to poverty in their country, and they felt that the best thing they could do was just to ship these people off and let somebody else deal with it. As you can see here, some of the original pictures from the farming in the area. It was believed the farms would be a good place for the children to eat well, learn life skills. Some took the children in and adopted them, but others used them as cheap sources of labor. They were to be cared for and sent to school through the winter, but many did not see the basic necessities of life. Some were beaten and forced to live in barns and stables. So a lot of these people who were sent here, especially young children or teenagers, were sent here and they were treated like almost similar to slaves, but they had a little bit more than what the slaves and treated. But many of them were sent here. This is a direct result of the Industrial Revolution. This is the end of part one.